Welcome to The Secret Diary of a Producer. My name's Ed Taylor, and in this podcast we go behind the scenes of some of the biggest shows on television. 2005, a new series started on ITV. It was called Love Island, and it featured a group of celebrities on an island all dating. And it sort of did okay, and it got a second series, and then it disappeared, and we never heard of it, supposedly, again. But then suddenly in 2015, a show that had the same name but was completely different appeared out of nowhere and changed the face of television forever. It was, of course, Love Island as we know it today. It's now been 400 episodes and 12 series and spawned celebrities such as Molly May Hague, Olivia Attwood and Maura Higgins. Today, my guest is Richard Cowles, who's the executive producer and was there right from the start. He's going to tell me the story of how this new version came about, how this phoenix rose from the ashes, and exactly what the future is for the series. Welcome, Richard.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Ed.
When I think about Love Island, it's always like, where do you start with something like this? So 2015, I remember, because I was working at Potato, which is ITV Studios. And I remember we got a note from ITV Entertainment saying, we're going to do a big reality dating show. Can you come up with new ideas?
Yeah.
So my boss, Mike Culp, who interviewed for the J, said, right, we've got to come up with stuff, blah, blah, blah. And we went in and we pitched something which was a bit like Temptation Island, that kind of a thing. And I go, yeah, we kind of like that. But actually, we think we're going to redo Love Island. And that was the kind of thing. At the time, I thought, wow, that's a really interesting one, because Love Island obviously hadn't been on for 10 years. It had done 2 series in 2005, 2006, but it was entirely celebrity-based. And it did okay, but it didn't come back. So how did it go from, like, first of all, how did it kind of come up again as a thing that could be done? Based on bear in mind, it'd been tried 10 years before, hadn't quite worked, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the thing is that when it launched in 2005 and there was a second series in 2006, it was designed to be against Big Brother, which was at the height of its success on Channel 4. And so it was always sort of coming from a position of weakness in terms of that. I suppose where it got to in 2015 was that there was that call out for, we want a reality show. They sort of were interested in dating, which was quite interesting at the time because there were no dating shows. We put in a load of ideas and we sort of put Love Island in amongst them and discussed it. And they'd been talking about it themselves as well. It had been one of those ideas that whenever you were going to sort of pitch a new dating show or a new reality show to commissioners, they go, yeah. And then you'd always sort of end with, do you know, I really like Love Island. There was something in that. And it was a theme that we were kind of going, we must be able to reskin Love Island in some way. But we weren't quite sure what. And then I think ITV is its sort of natural home. It felt like, and the fact that they wanted to put it on ITV2 meant that all of a sudden we were looking at a demographic that was very focused. Whereas, you know, on ITV, you've got to be very broad. You've got to appeal to sort of quite a wide age range. And we do with Love Island. But I think the interesting thing is that, you know, we're looking at 16 to 34s. And so what is the incarnation of Love Island that appeals to them?
So it was a bit like sort of unfinished business. It was one of those shows that's just kind of, you know, there's always something that everyone goes, do you remember that?
Yeah.
So when you went back in with it for that call out, had you, because it's nothing like the original version. I mean, obviously it doesn't have celebrities in. So had you done all that work already, or was it kind of more of a, we'd like to rework it? Where were you at there when that happened?
There was sort of, there were conversations about the other shows. And then we had talked about a reimagined Love Island, but without celebrities, and that would reflect the audience of ITV2.
Right.
And we do I'm a Celebrity. We've done, and the original Love Island was fast turnaround. And we were really keen that it was a fast turnaround show that was stripped over a number of weeks. And then beyond that, every bit of format that we used to put in, we used to take out because everyone wanted it to be reactive. Right. And that was sort of central to the whole premise of the idea. And this came a lot from the commissioners at the network as well. As the idea evolved, you know, you go in with a pitch deck, you deliver this vision, and then you unpick the whole thing, don't you? And I think the thing that we felt that was most interesting, once we got over the hurdle of no celebrities, then it was kind of, how do we make that as the whole proposition as relatable as possible. I mean, the glorious thing about it is it sort of takes on a rites of passage moment for most people, where you go on a summer holiday and you're of a certain age, you're single, and you're hoping to find love, or at least holiday romance. And so it took that as the central theme, and then thought, well, how do we put that in a constructed environment? How do we turn around those stories day by day? And then what are the levers that we can pull to to up the drama and to test people? Because essentially everything that we do in Love Island is gamifying the love experience, if you like.
Yeah.
And that was central to the proposition, is that you're going to watch people, and we were really confident at this point, you're going to watch people fall in love in real time. So they arrive, they're nothing, and then you're going to watch every step of their relationship to the point where there's sort of winners announced. And that's quite a sort of unique prospect to see that, which is why I think it engages so many sort of people, because everyone can kind of relate to the trials and tribulations of love and matters of heart.
Yeah, it's so immediate, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what's so kind of affecting about it. And then just to go back to think about the celebrities thing as well, because I did wonder about that. I mean, pretty much every idea that you talk to ITV about, at some point you'll have a conversation around what is the role of celebrity going to be, particularly for the main channel, perhaps not quite as much for ITV2. Did you toy with that celebrity notion at all?
Yeah, definitely.
But because it was quite brave at that point to go, do you know what, we're just going to go with unknowns as a format, and we're going to rely entirely on the format and the precinct, which I hadn't, you're so right, aren't you, that the sort of insight around it is people going on holiday trying to look for love.
Yeah.
And it feels like that. And it's like, it comes at the point in time when in the beginning of June, when you're just close about to do that.
Exactly. When the timing of when it goes on air is absolutely.
Yeah.
Although there was a point where it was just sort of overlapping with exams, which wasn't very popular with certain parents. But essentially, it's like that moment when everyone is looking forward to having their own sort of summer holiday and Love Island experience.
Yeah.
And so, but the celebrity thing was, I mean, there is a practical difficulty in terms of casting celebrities,
of course.
Young single celebrities. This is sort of pre-influencer days, so it's quite a small pool of people, especially when you're looking for it to be ITV2. But we sort of discounted that quite quickly, because it was about, I've said this before, and it really was a conversation that we had, which was, we really feel that we can create the celebrities of tomorrow. We will find people who will be so engaging with this sort of tight audience that will, they'll almost become stars in their own right. It took a few seasons for that to come true, but it did. And I think just that relatability that we sort of used to, with the casting team went round and looked for various people. And as we started to get into it, what we were kind of finding is that especially outside of the big cities, you would go to lots of towns all around the UK, and there would be these sort of big fish in little ponds. They were sort of the masters of dating in their small dating pool within that world. And they had something about them. And then when you put them in a villa with lots of other sort of big fish from small ponds, suddenly it becomes quite an interesting sort of prospect.
The masters and mistresses of dating.
Exactly.
Okay, that's.
I mean, it's very easy to say that now. It was, we were on that first series. We were, you shoot from the hip, don't you, on a first series, and you're making an awful lot up as you go along, and you're trying to make sense of it. But we were really clear that it should be not be celebrities, and that they should be relatable kind of people who, fundamental thing about all of casting on Love Island is that you need to have people that can express their feelings and talk about all of the emotional ranges that they're going through, and document that story for you. And we did that with the first series, and I think we've got better and better at doing it.
Yeah, 100%. And with the casting, because I think, obviously you've got a great format, you've got a wonderful setting for it. Did you do any sorts of test casting for the commissioners before it got commissioned, or did the casting evolve out of making the show? Because I think that was one of the things that everybody was quite gobsmacked by the cast right from the beginning, because it was these sorts of, as you said, these demigods almost, with their own language and their own way of talking. It felt like they almost had their own culture together anyway. Where did that come from about in the process?
So the casting team, so Mike Spencer Hayter, who is sort of director of unscripted now, but then was exec and creative director, he and Lewis, who is the exec producer now, they started on the casting team, and Mike had come from Towie, which had sort of changed the whole kind of environment of ITV2 shows and how things were put together. And, they were just really, really good. And they surrounded themselves with a team of young people and sent them out to find these people. And it's always down to the casting team and, how well they find just these engaging characters who you kind of don't always believe that they exist until you see them. So they would go out and I think we put together, I think there was probably a few tapes that we sort of put in front of Angela, who was the commissioner, and sort of talked about, here's the type of people. But really it's a process, isn't it? And you're constantly meeting as many people. And then what is that final mix?
And so when you're doing the casting, you presumably you ask them a series of questions and film it, and that becomes the casting tape, and you design a sort of questionnaire, or you how does that work?
It's far more complicated and evolved now, but essentially a lot of the casting comes from applications. So people will apply and want, obviously in subsequent series rather than that first one. But the first one was about, let's go out and scour the country, because you want it to be as broad and as inclusive of the whole country as possible, and find these people. As the series has evolved, now there was a point where we would get, because casting's always on, we don't get these numbers now, but there was a point where we were getting 120,000 applications for a series, which is quite hard to sort through. I think the thing is, it's about going out and doing the sort of searching. The social media was at its sort of in its infancy then. Instagram wasn't what it is now, but that's become a tool of casting. But really it was a good old fashioned send people out, send them to nightclubs, send them to, wherever young people congregate and talk to them.
And what are the attributes of the perfect Love Island contestant in your mind? Like, what are the sort of, top 4 or 5 things that you look for?
Absolute number one is they have to want to go into a relationship.
Right.
I think you can tell when people are going on it for a different reason. So apps, and there's been a lot of examples of people who have never had a relationship and have gone on there, but they are absolutely desperate to have a relationship, but they just don't quite know how that works. And it's a different dating world from when I was sort of going through that experience. And I think that, which has become a big part of the show. But I suppose they have to absolutely be looking for love. They have to be emotionally intelligent in terms of be able to talk us through and vocalize their feelings and how certain interactions are making them feel. They have to be open to exploring lots of different relationships and sort of like, you're there to find the one, not anyone. And so the idea is it's understanding that you're going into this environment with quite a small pool of people that you can date, but you're absolutely hoping to come out with in a.
Okay. And when you were filming that for very first series, and it was very innovative, obviously, and now you look back on it and you go, well, at the time, did it feel like you were creating something very new and fresh? I mean, sometimes, for example, when we talked to the producer of Downton Abbey, and they were saying, well, we shot all the kind of upstairs scenes in the house down in the south, and then we shot all the downstairs scenes in a studio in Pinewood, and we literally had no idea what they would kind of glue together. And it was only when we got into the edit after 5 weeks, and we were like, wow, it really, really works. Did you have a sense of it working when you were shooting it, or being kind of like, this is really good, or what was?
Yeah, I think we had a real confidence in the central premise in terms of, because, there's been Temptation Island. We made a series of Temptation Island before, and there have been lots of shows where young people have been put together, and you're going to get interesting stories and interesting dynamics. I think the bit that was scary was that it was fast turnaround, and you've got a show in 24 hours, and what will happen? Will you be able to tell the story in time? And telling the stories was really quite sort of difficult to get our heads around in terms of how are we going to make sure we understand every step of this journey in terms of when these people fall in love, because sometimes people can just change their mind very, very quickly. And how do you tell that story? But I think on that first series, we felt like something was happening. I mean, it wasn't an immediate overnight success, because it was a big, expensive show. And with all of those shows, there's a lot of chin scratching and consideration as to whether it's going to come back. And I think ITV, they were very confident about the show. It was just, do the numbers add up? And how do we sort of improve on?
Yeah. And what is the most challenging aspect of making the show? I mean, you talked about the fast turnaround. Is that the hardest bit? Because you've got multiple stories. You're trying to figure out who's going to go where, and presumably you're trying to figure out who might work with who, and you've had those thoughts from the beginning as well. What's the most difficult bit of it for you?
I mean, the fast turnaround thing we kind of know from I'm a Celebrity, so we know that we can do that. I think it's being able to tell the stories. And one of the things that we did, which was, I think, helped by the fact that, if you've got a scale of reality, you've got kind of fully constructed reality, your sort of Towers made in Chelsea's, which are still real, but they're quite rigidly sort of produced. And then you've got, I'm a Celebrity and Big Brother at the other end, which is let's just turn the cameras on and see what happens. We sort of sit somewhere in the middle in the fact that we've got villa producers that are in the villa off camera, constantly talking to the islanders and trying to work out, how they're feeling, what they're doing. And it's not a sort of an on-camera interview like in the Beach Hut. It's more sort of understanding where they're at, so that we don't get caught out with, well, hang on, why have these two split up? We just, what's happened? And so it's about managing those stories and managing the pacing of those stories. And that was the hardest thing to try and work out. But putting in villa producers was probably the main thing for doing that.
Yeah, the key things. And in terms of one of the things I always talk about is that thing with television, whereby things can kind of take a sudden and very peculiar turn for the worse. And it just looks like disaster or catastrophe or something like that. Did you have any moments like that in that first series where you just thought, this is never going to work, or this is never going to get commissioned, or, it's just not happening?
I don't think we ever felt that. I think we were sort of confident in the format. I think, we had used Love Island quite deliberately to say, here is a brand that is recognizable.
Yeah.
We all do it now. Everyone does it. It's sort of like, if there is something that will give you a little bit of a bump up in terms of, well, people will be intrigued by it. So then I think what we felt was the Love Island brand will bring intrigue and hopefully an audience that will want to kind of go, I wonder what this new version of it is. I think the concern was, will they like this new version? It doesn't have the celebrities. It's a different version of the show. We learned a lot of things on that first series. I think the live, we only had it in that first series where we'd have a live show at the end of every week, where we felt that we would have a vote off. So there would always be this sort of end to the week, which is someone's going. And what we felt actually after the first series is that really constrained us in terms of the pacing of the show, how we wanted to sort of the relationships to play out. Sometimes you kind of go, oh, we're about to get rid of someone and we don't want to get rid of them. Yeah. Or we'd actually rather throw a bombshell in there and someone who's going to sort of develop the story. So I think we felt very quickly, we felt quite locked into having a live show every week. And we were really glad when we sort of got rid of that.
And so when so you do that first show, and because it's kind of going out almost sort of simultaneously, you're making it, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You must have got to the end of it and just thought, what just happened? I mean, it's kind of over, because normally you have this period of reflection, don't you, after you've made something, and you can sort of thinking, well, when it goes out, we'll see, and blah blah blah. But it was done. What the first series it did well, but it wasn't a sort of super hit. What happened next? And was there a long period of gestation within ITV, or was it sort of?
No, because if I mean, there was definitely a period where we were talking about it a lot, and how do we grow that audience? We felt like we had a really solid base. It was good numbers for a brand new show. Every new show is hard to launch, so it was good numbers for that. But I think, for a show of that scale, there needed to be a proof that it would grow.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we really, and I think we were probably quite pioneering in this, is that we wrapped social media into the whole kind of DNA of the show and creating that conversation. And what was really interesting was, you get your viewing figures, but what you're also seeing is this growing we call it a fandom now. We didn't call it a fandom then. We just saw this growing appetite for the stories and for a conversation around the show, which meant that people were engaged and people were interested. And that was a big part of our sort of pitch for a second series, is that we really want to elevate all of the kind of social media around it and all the conversation around it. And ultimately that led to us having this sort of 24-hour kind of policy. So we would go, you've got the show on air for 1 hour at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then you would have, you've got these sort of tempos. You've got the show, then you've got a podcast in the morning, which is debriefing on everything that's happened in the show. And then you've got your first look tease, which happens at lunchtime. And then in between all of that, we've got a digital team that are posting content that sort of fuels the conversation, but then it happens so organically.
Yeah.
Someone told me some ridiculous stat last night, which was that I think over last year, 49 billion organic posts about Love Island across the 28 territories that the country is. That's extraordinary, isn't it?
That's absolutely great.
I think 9 billion of those were ours, but
that's 7 times the population of the planet.
I know, it's just ridiculous. But the conversation is huge.
It's off the scale. And did you have conversations about social media on that very first series, or did it, as the series evolved, did it sort of, because it did well on social media? Wow.
No, we really wanted it on the first series. One of the things was it was going to be a vote, so we were very keen to create an app which allowed the voting, because we sort of said this is an audience that has a phone in their pocket. They do everything through their phone, so we should be trying. No one's going to ring up. They're going to use. And then it was like, well, what else are we going to put on there? We couldn't really do it on that first series, but we'd been experimenting with social media on I'm a Celebrity, and then it felt like here was a real opportunity to really lean into that. So it was very much, and it was different social media then. It was, Instagram was sort of still in its infancy. You didn't get stories, didn't get all of that, but you would have, I think, sort of Twitter as it was then, and Facebook were the kind of the two biggies.
But it's still very forward thinking, and the fact that the network got behind it with you on that as well, because we have conversations with broadcasters today where social media is still a kind of thing that they don't necessarily automatically think, oh, we should definitely have a strategy around that or a policy around that. So to have been doing that and embracing that and really integrating that back in 2015 was really progressive.
Yeah, and I wish I could say I could take any credit for that. It was young people who were very, very kind of.
We did listen to that.
We did listen to them.
And that's a good thing.
But also, what was interesting is you could only really do it and get that level of engagement on a fast turnaround show. We do socials across all of our shows, but it's harder when it's post-produced because there's just not that urgency. Yeah. Whereas everything about this show is, here's a group of people that are going to fall in love. You're going to watch that in real time as it happens. You can talk about it because what everyone loves talking about other people's relationships, more than their own. And so it was engaging with that, and it just built we saw huge growth on that first series, and it was pushing on an open door with network. They kind of understood, and the digital team was, I think, part of the network at that point, but we embedded them in our show. So yeah, it was really,
very, very progressive. Yes, because I think the first time I ever heard the word influencer was in conjunction with Love Island.
yes,
And I think my
probably Molly May. It's usually
exactly. But my awareness of sort of influencers and social media, I think, probably grew out of what was happening with Love Island. I mean, it felt that Love Island sort of almost amplified something that was just in its infancy, as you say, at that point, particularly around visuals.
Yes,
because Love Island is such a visual show, and it was coming out at the same time as Instagram and then eventually TikTok. Were visual forms of social media rather than written forms of social media. But the two do seem kind of synonymous with each other.
Yeah, and it's grown with them, and and it changes. It becomes about these very clever producers who are playing the algorithms, and which one is the right one for which content to get the most engagement. So there's a real science.
So there isn't it does better on Instagram, it does better on TikTok. It's just dependent on the content.
But they keep changing their algorithms, and so it's about it's about having people that understand that stuff, which is certainly not me, and then it's about how do they adapt with the changing algorithms and what's being prioritized on that social channel, and then how do you leverage that for the show.
I had no idea that I obviously I knew it was sort of synonymous with it, but I sort of had this thought in my mind, naively, that it had been picked up by social media, but obviously it wasn't.
It was very much we were feeding it. From the outset, we were trying to build. I don't think we ever understood or imagined that it would grow to what it has now, and it's absolutely integral to it. But it was definitely sort of built into this is a key pillar of the show.
Yeah. So season 1 comes out and it does pretty well, and they say, well, we're going to do another season, and off you go and do the second season. And what I remember a point when I think it might have been season 3, but you'll know better than me, when we were all given Love Island water bottles at ITV because it had kind of arrived at a point where it was now products, and it was becoming a really like a big brand, and ITV was always behind it, but ITV was aware that it had so much potential in it. At what point did that sort of happen in the series? Was that series 3, would you say? Or
well, the water bottles went in the first series, so that they'd sort of been there. And actually, it was someone on the team who said, I'd buy one of those. And you kind of go, okay. So that's interesting. And then the commercial team at ITV, we sort of talked to them about it, and the Love Island shop was born, and now we've got suitcases and all the rest. Yeah. But then it also opened up a pathway to commercial deals. And the big thing that we were always looking at was, how do we license out Love Island and have partnerships with people, but in a way that it doesn't feel, like we're really shoehorning it in. It feels really natural. I think there was sort of sun lotion was one of the early ones. We had sunglasses. It was all things that you would find in that world. And I think when you've kind of got that age group, they're engaged and they want to kind of go, I'd like that. I want that. And it's so, ITV is a commercial channel. They're always looking for commercial opportunities. And so it's just grown with that.
So it's grown with the series. At what point, though, do you become aware that it's not just something which is big on television and doing really well on social media, but actually it's kind of entering the sort of cultural fabric of the country, because it just started to creep in and spawn other shows that were lookalike shows and all that kind of stuff. What do you remember thinking, gosh, what have I created at some point?
Oh, not me. It's very much a team effort.
What have we created?
What have we created?
What have we done?
What have we done? I think, even on those early series, there was, I think Primark were putting, because the language of youth and some of the expressions and things, I think in that first series, there was a character called John going, "You make me feel like a unicorn." And then suddenly this was on a t-shirt. Yeah. And so you're seeing the engagement with the show really picking up. And then as it's gone on, it's engaged a really broad audience and sometimes unexpected audience. So there's been so many think pieces from people cleverer than me who write about all of the all of the ideas. And I think Love Island becomes a jumping off point for people to go, I'm really interested in this aspect that is reflected in the show. I'm going to talk about that. There's been academic papers. I mean, we even sort of took part in an Oxford Union debate. It's extraordinary. I suppose it's at that point where you kind of go, oh my God, there's so much being written about this show in such a broad way. So I suppose it's that.
And how does that make you feel? Because I mean, most people, if they're lucky, have one of those shows. But you've had two with I'm a Celebrity and Love Island. How does that make you feel to sort of have been a key a member of that team or leading that team that has created something which has been so culturally iconic and recognised and becomes a big talking point for the nation?
Yeah, it's great. I think the thing is, it's with I'm a Celebrity, everything always happens when we're in Australia, so it's such a long way. We don't really kind of get a sense of that. With Love Island, because we sort of go back and forth quite a bit, you sort of sit on a bus and you hear someone talking about what's been happening last night, and it kind of hits you, and you go, "Okay, wow, this really is sort of everywhere." And you're overhearing conversations. I think as producers, we all want our work to be seen, don't we?
Yeah.
So I think we're all kind of really happy that people are engaged with it and want to watch it and want more of it. And then the sort of the little producer thing ticks away, and you're going, how do we keep them?
Yeah.
How do we keep them here? How do we make sure they're disengaged forever?
So your partners in this, obviously WPP Motion Entertainment. How did that side of it come about?
So that was something that came via network. Via the ITV has a deal with Motion, and so it became part of the overall deal. This is ITV2, which is not the main channel. It's a very expensive show. In the same way with films, I think it was felt like there needs to be additional money brought into this, and they've been great. They've been really great partners all the way through. So and Martin and Karen, who have been there from the very beginning, and are still there with us now.
And what do you think the impact of Love Island has been on British television as a whole? What do you think what's its legacy been, do you think?
I think it's interesting in 2015 when we launched it, dating was sort of a genre that no one was really thinking about in terms of television or reality. It's sort of, I think people are kind of, there'd been Love Island, there's Temptation Island, I think had finished by then, but had been around. And I think in America, there were sort of shows like The Bachelor and Joe Millionaire, but none of that really resonated in the UK particularly. I think you could sort of look around the TV landscape now and go, there is a lot of dating, and there are a lot of dating shows, and they all have their place, and they all have their own kind of individual way of appealing to an audience. But I do think we got there quite early with Love Island in terms of starting that. Now, some people will be glad about that, some people might not, but for me, I'm incredibly proud that we created something that's it's sold to 28 territories. And it's huge. And America now is sort of at this stage where it's blowing up to a scale which is phenomenal.
And there's so many shows on the streamers and so forth which all owe a debt, whether it be Love Is Blind or something else, in some way to Love Island, don't they? I mean, there's a kind of.
I think every show is indebted to the shows that have been before it. And Love Island, well, specifically Celebrity Love Island, but I think generally, there are no real, truly original ideas in television. There are just original takes on subjects. And so, what the interesting challenge with Love Island was, how do you take something that has existed before and then turn it into something completely new? And I think people now are sort of developing shows, and we're developing, dating shows as well. We're in a world where all of these shows exist. How do you find something unique and new? In some ways, it's easier when there's nothing else there. And now it's quite hard. What's the different thing? What's the thing that's going to make an audience want to watch this, either instead of or as well as that?
Is there someone who's been on like Love Island who's kind of so memorable to you, who's like a contestant who has just been, my God, this is the one that kind of, we didn't know what to do with them? Or what is there one person that stands out in your mind as being completely extraordinary?
I think everyone has their favorite. So everyone everyone on the team, everyone that's viewing it, And I think that's sort of either just about the moment where they come in, because a big part of Love Island is creating those sort of jaw drop moments where you're going, this is amazing. And I suppose for me, the one that sort of resonates is Maura Higgins, who came in and probably was like the most extraordinary bombshell ever. So I suppose that's for me, but there are so many of them, you know, that have gone through. I mean, it's not always just about love as well. You know, it's often about the relationships between the men and the women, and those sort of the bonding, how they support one another. You know, Chris and Kem, who were in one of the early series, I think it was 3, they kind of formed this relationship that people sort of loved. So it's as much, the relationships are absolutely fundamental to the show, and that's what it's about. But the relationships that form around that is really sort of interesting.
The bromances and the tribalism and the difference in the sexes. I agree.
And how they support one another is really interesting and important. And as part of that kind of dialogue, being able to talk to one another, and you know, those conversations that they're having between each other are often sparking similar conversations, you know, on the sofa with people. Yeah, the number of people that say to me they watch it with their children, and it's a way of talking about things that perhaps wouldn't come up naturally. Not that I'm saying that we're, we're an entertainment show first and foremost.
And Maura Higgins, of course, has now sort of broken America, hasn't she?
Yeah, she's now Dancing with the Stars. There's been a few, but I think she's one of the few that has sort of broken America.
So you've got the villa out in Spain, and you've got production. How many people are on the production team? Like, how many people does it take to make Love Island?
How many do you think?
160.
270-ish.
270-ish?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge team because it's 24/7. It's around 250, 270. It sort of varies, but yeah, it's around that number because you've got all your edit suites happening there 24 hours a day. You've got a gallery full of producers that are following every single story. They're being interviewed all the time. You've got the execs. You've got all the, an incredible production management team who are making it all happen. So, and then you've got drivers. You've got everything. It's a lot of people because you're essentially, what you would do in a post-produced series, you're doing in 24 hours. It's that reactive, and you need a lot of people, and you need very teams that are dedicated to a particular thing. So you've got the villa producers who are doing that. You've got the beach hut producers who are interviewing all the time, making sure we've got the stories. You've got, a big team in the edit who are sort of the communication between what's happening in the gallery, how those stories are being sort of sent through. And it's a constant process.
Sure. And with it, so you've obviously got camera points which drive a lot of the drama, and those are your kind of mechanisms as a producer to make sure you get content. But do you get involved in making any suggestions to them about, or maybe have you thought of dating this person, or have you thought of talking to this person, or is it entirely left up to them and then you work with what you've got? No,
it's left up to them. I think the role of the villa producers is to be a sort of a sounding board for how they're feeling. And I think with everyone, so there is no suggestion. Everything that they do, they're doing because that's what they want to do.
Right.
And so every decision about dating or every decision, but because they're in a process where they're talking to someone a lot. I mean, in terms of dating, there is so much conversation about every move that they're having with each other, but also with us as a production in terms of, how you're feeling, what do you do? What do you feel about this? So it's more about I think through the process of discussing it, whether that be with each other or with the producers or in the beach hut, they form their own kind of opinions and they understand things. I mean, a lot of the islanders, they come out and they say every single day in there is like 2 weeks because it's so intense. There's, so much happening in terms of, if you were sort of starting out in a relationship, you'd probably go on a date, every couple of days, maybe once a week. You're dating every single day. You're surrounded by those people. You're dating in front of the people that you've been dating before or that you might still have a connection with. It's a really sort of interesting, but not always kind of, we try to make it as real world as possible, but it's it's different. You're
Yeah.
intense.
It's a pressure cooker, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, that's it's a love pressure cooker.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting. One of the one of the people that first came out with the first series said, what was really different about this was, if I've sort of had a relationship with someone or got with someone and then I don't want to carry it on, I just walk away. I'm not there. But here you have to confront everything, and I think that's what's really interesting about the relationships that happen in there. There's no ghosting on on Love Island. You are confronted with the consequences of the good and the bad of your decisions.
Yeah.
And everyone's got an opinion.
Yeah, yeah. And with Maya Jama, obviously, she plays a very specific role. She does it absolutely brilliantly. And you presumably you brief her on all the stories before she goes in and so forth. But
but she's a fan of the show. She watches. She's watched it from the beginning. I think Maya's been around for, I think she appeared on our early After Suns as a panelist, and she just was absolutely so engaged and so into the content that we kind of. And then her career grew alongside Love Island, and then we were really lucky to have her in there.
Anything else for us?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion at the outset of Love Island as to whether these are young people, relationships are going to form, sex will happen, and obviously the overriding thing is consent and welfare and making sure that all happens in a safe space. But then the conversation becomes, do we show it? And on that first series, there were let's say that I won't name them, but people who have watched will know there was a couple that decided that it was definitely going to happen, and it did. But it sort of happened in basically a room where you've got lots of other people sleeping, and we weren't expecting that, but it sort of happened in public. And we weren't. Yeah, I mean, obviously we sort of cut around it in quite a gentle way, but there was a long conversation with the network about, do we show this? Is sex something that should feature within the show? And actually, I'm sort of glad we did. We don't do it so much now, but it was about validating the authenticity of these relationships. Young people have sex, and so I think it felt like it was valid to show it, and it was valid. And we sort of talked to everyone in advance that if you have sex in there, condoms are everywhere and all the rest, but it could be shown, and it will be shown in a tasteful way, but you just need to be aware of that. So I think that's always been, and it's quite shocking for producers, it's not just the people in that room, but you've got a gallery of 30 people who are sort of watching this and sort of wondering where they should be looking and what should be happening. But in the research that we do post-series, it's a really important part that people believe and understand that all of these relationships are authentic, and sex is part of that.
And you absolutely right. So I think I remember that from the first series, and I remember thinking, because it was so discreet and it felt very real and organic. I did sort of think, well, actually, this is genuine. This is happening as it is, because it hasn't been produced for me.
Yeah.
Sex. Yeah, it's just sort of happened very discreetly into the covers. So
now it tends to be sort of a foot moving under the cover, and it's sort of it's evolved. But I think every series sort of develops a grammar, doesn't it? And I think in those early days, it was really important that it felt authentic, and it felt like these relationships were really, really developing. And I think now everyone kind of, you don't need to see quite as much.
Yeah, well, you've established his credibility.
Exactly.
Authority, haven't you? So the job's done.
Yeah.
Is there anything you've learned about your relationship? Have you either taken home and thought, actually, I use this line tonight?
Absolutely not. I think if you ask my wife, she would say I've learned nothing. I think what's, you have to be a specific type of person to want to go on Love Island and to be there. But I think there's a bravery to go on a show and really, relationships, and the reason why it works, relationships is a vulnerable. You're at a vulnerable point in terms of your life. They affect you in really, really heightened positive ways, and then when it doesn't necessarily go your way, it's really negative. So I suppose I've learned that our casts are incredibly brave to put their emotions. I've learned that I would be a terrible islander, and I'm sure that my wife would agree. Not that I think I'm probably quite a long way from being able to be an islander, but if I ever would have been. But I think I think that's probably have I learned anything? I've learned that.
Yeah.
I think people who've come out and formed relationships and kept those relationships and had children, that is probably the benchmark of success for the show. But I think there has been around it, success in a different way. We talked about Maura, but then we've also got Molly May, who's done incredibly well. There are lots. Olivia Atwood has done incredible work, and they start on Love Island. But I'm not saying Love Island is the cause of their success or it has any sort of can be thanked for it. But I think it sort of gave them a platform for, and that just goes to show how good the casting was, that you found people that resonate with an audience and can really make people sort of go, I like this person, I want to spend more time with them, because that's what we're hoping to get from all on-screen talent.
What they
are,
really, isn't it? And then that's
exactly
the quality of the
exactly.
talent. Richard Cowles, thank you so much.
No problem.
It's a pleasure talking to you about it.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Cheers.
When I first came up with the idea of doing The Secret Diary of a Producer, I thought I'd really want to interview Richard Cowles and talk about Love Island, because few shows have had such an impact on popular culture as this one. I think what my biggest insight that I took from our conversation was the fact that the whole ethos of the series is built around the idea of a rite of passage, specifically aimed at that period of time that's so familiar to many of us, the time when we're going from a teenager to being an adult, and for the first time not going on holiday with our parents but going on holiday with our mates, and we've usually got one thing on our minds: romance. And I remember when I was 17 heading off to Calella de la Costa with my mates for my first holiday, and every single iteration of Love Island, whether the format points change or the host changes, fundamentally feeds into that idea. And for 16 to 35-year-olds, relatability, seeing people going through what they're going through at the same time, is absolutely critical to getting their interest and getting them to watch it. And I think at the heart of it, that is probably the biggest success of Love Island. It's the reason why it's had 49 billion posts on social media. I mean, posts, not likes, posts on social media over its history. It's an extraordinary success story, and it does something because it is so relatable to a time in our lives that so many of us go through.